Hey guys, it's Taylor here. I've got a little project for today, our daily project. Walked into our downstairs bathroom and noticed that underneath the cabinet, something was leaking. It was soaking wet under the cabinet. So I'm gonna bring you in here. We're gonna take a look at what the problem is, and then I'm gonna show you how to fix it. Come on. I've got my cameraman with me today, my daughter Lila.
Hi.
So we're gonna go down underneath the sink and I'm going to show you what the problem is here. So as we come down underneath here, you can see, if I turn on the water, you can see the water is just pouring out, and the problem is actually right here. The attachment point right here for the mechanism that raises and lowers the drain, after about 30 years, this thing has actually broken and failed. And so what we have is a hole on the back side of the drain where the water is leaking out. So what we're gonna do is we need to replace this piece right here, which is called the pop-up assembly. So I'm gonna show you guys how to take this drain apart. We're gonna take the old pop-up assembly out, and then we're gonna put a new one in. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is disassemble the trap right here that's part of the drain. So I'm gonna just loosen these screws. And these parts of your drain should always just be finger tight. It should never be, you should never tighten these down with a wrench because you can damage the little plastic inserts inside. This is the actual trap portion of the drain, and drains are disgusting. You can see how gross this situation is. You can see how gross that is inside. So we're probably gonna clean all that out also as part of this process. This part of the trap can stay, I'm gonna clean that part also. So we're gonna take that part out, and now we need to remove this bottom nut that's holding the pop-up assembly in place. To do that, I'm gonna need to grab a wrench that will fit over top of this. We'll remove that, take this assembly out, clean along the bottom and along the top in the sink, and then put the new assembly in. Okay, so I said I was gonna go grab a wrench. Instead what I've grabbed is this pair of pliers. These are called channel lock pliers, and they're great because they're adjustable, so you can adjust them to the size that you need, and this is going to allow us to get to the size we need to undo the nut on this pop-up assembly. So let's head under here and take a look at it. So this right here is what we need to undo. And so I'm gonna just grab onto that and start loosening this up. I think I was going the wrong way. There we go. And once you get it started, you can then easily finish it just by hand here. Okay, so we're gonna loosen this up. And this faucet has been in place for a long time. It's probably original to the house, maybe 30 years old. And so it's not surprising that, that this assembly is kind of stuck in here the way it is. So now as I'm undoing this, if you come look up in the sink, come on up here, you can see that it's loosening up in here, and this part is actually threaded onto that assembly. So now I've got to grab onto this flange here and loosen that up and unscrew it, and then the whole assembly will drop out the bottom. Okay, and you can see how gross that is. Drains are disgusting. Thank you. If you've never felt thankful for indoor plumbing, maybe you do now. So we'll drop all that in there. We're going to clean out up here in the sink. If you come up here, you can see there's this leftover putty right here, and there's some stuff down in there. I'm gonna grab some paper towels and get that all cleaned out. And then I'm gonna come back and show you how to put the new assembly in. Okay, so I've got all my parts cleaned up and I'm ready to start putting this back together. Now the first thing I need to do is this flange that's gonna sit right down here in the bottom of the sink. I need to put a compound called plumber's putty underneath this flange in order to make it waterproof. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a little glob of this, and just like we did in elementary school, I'm going to roll this out into a snake. And I've got too much. This is probably about all I'm gonna need. I'm gonna roll this out and I'm gonna stick it underneath the rim of this flange. And then when I tighten the assembly down, the new pop-up assembly, when I tighten it down, this is gonna kind of smush and fill up all of the holes and the gaps and create a watertight seal underneath this flange so that the sink and the new assembly doesn't leak. And it looks like I need just a little bit more there. So I'm gonna set that down. And I'm gonna roll this out like that. And then set this into place here. Now, that is ready. And so now I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna set this down into position, and I'm gonna kind of start pushing it down. And you can see the extra putty squeezing up around the edges here. Now I'm gonna take the main portion of the pop-up assembly and I'm gonna go underneath, and we're gonna install this part into the bottom of this flange. And then we're going to reattach the trap and the drain plumbing. Okay, so now back under the sink. The first thing I need to do is take the main part of the assembly and screw it into the flange that we just installed. So with one hand, I'm gonna hold that flange in place. With the other, I'm going to thread this into that part of the assembly. There we go, got the threads lined up. Now I've got to position this little hole right here on the back side of this drain assembly, because this is where the lever that's going to control the drain plug, this is actually the part that broke on the old assembly. This needs to be positioned at the back of the sink. So I'm going to rotate this around, and then I'm going to pull this snugly down into place and start tightening up this this large stop nut that also has this thick black rubber gasket on it. And that rubber gasket is what actually makes the full drain assembly waterproof. This is going to squeeze up into the bottom of the sink and create a seal and make sure that all the water is directed down the drain instead of leaking out. Now that that is in place, I never removed this old assembly, so I'm gonna need my pliers to get that done. Got my channel locks right here. I'm gonna just adjust these down to a small enough size. And now I can get in here and loosen this part of the assembly up. And that drops off, so it's out of the way. And you can see I've got a new one with the new pop-up assembly that I bought. Next thing we need to do is start reattaching the drain pieces. And we've got to kind of dry fit these a little bit and make sure they're going to go on correctly. And that all looks good right there. So I need to put this together in the correct order in order for it to seal properly. So this type of joint is called a slip joint, and we've got this little angled washer here, and I actually put that on backwards. It goes this way with the angle facing forward, and when I put this back together, that washer is going to sit inside the rim of the other piece of pipe, and then this this large nut is going to create compression on that spot and make a waterproof seal that is easily removed. Same thing here. The end of the pipe has the little angled piece on it, so there's no washer. So this part is going to just drop down, and that's going to screw on up under there. And then this part feeds up in here. Now, I had to cut the old washer off in order to get the old assembly apart. So I'm going to grab a new washer, and I'm going to slide that up right here with this nut, and then I can put the rest of my trap assembly together. Then we can put in the pop-up mechanism, and then we'll be ready to check it and see if we've done it right and if it's leaking or not. So I've got my new angled washer here, and this is actually a reduction washer because this pipe is 1.25 inches and the PVC that we're attaching to is 1.5 inches. And so this washer is designed to fit around an 1.25 inch tail piece and fit into an 1.5 inch sized drain piece. So I'm going to slide the nut up here first, then I'm going to slide on the washer, and I'm going to work this up pretty high up here so it's out of the way as I start to do this assembly, because this is going to be one of the last parts that we're going to tighten down. So I've got this loosely fit over here. I'm going to slide this on up, and I'm going to start to tighten down this junction in our trap assembly. We're going to set that over right about there, and now I can start sliding this down, get it to approximately the position that I want it, and now I can tighten all three of these nuts down to create the watertight seals that we need in these three spots. And that's it. That trap is now back together and assembled correctly. We're gonna water test it here in a minute. The last thing we need to do is reassemble this pop-up assembly. And the way this works is this bar is going to slide into the back of this, and that little peg sticking out is going to engage the drain stopper. Sorry about that. It's going to engage the drain stopper and allow you to raise and lower the stopper in the drain up in the sink. So here's our new stopper assembly. I'm going to drop this down from above, and I'm going to position it so that this little hole right here, the bar from this lever is going to slide into that hole like this, so that when you activate the stopper, the stopper lever, it's going to raise the stopper up and down. I apologize for the mediocre camera work here. This is a little bit tricky to do. So I've got the stopper set in the drain, and now I'm going to get this positioned in from the back, and I'm manually adjusting it and checking, and it has mated correctly with the stopper. So now I've got this collar in place, and I can tighten down this collar, and inside this collar there are a couple of little washers that fit around the ball on this assembly, and again make that a watertight interaction as well. So we're going to tighten this down. We don't want to over tighten that, and we can see that that is working now. It's activating our drain up top, so that's good. We can go ahead now. I'm going to put my bucket back underneath here, and we're going to check this and make sure that our assembly is in fact waterproof and watertight. So bucket in place, we're going to turn the water on, and we're going to let it run for a little bit. And we can see right here, we've got a little water leaking out. And so what that tells me is that this nut, there we go, so you can hear better. We've got water leaking out from right up here around this, which is typically the most difficult part. The most difficult part to get tight is this one, because you've got to compress this washer. So this needs to be tighter. Everything else, the rest of this assembly looks good. I don't see any water leaking out anywhere else. So we're going to tighten this down. So I wasn't able to get it tight enough by hand to stop that small leak. So I've gone back to my channel locks, and this allows me to get a whole lot more leverage on this thing to get it tightened down. And you can see it's starting to squeeze nice and tight up here. So let's check this again. Now we have no new leaks coming out anywhere, so I think we've got that tight. We're going to assemble the rest of this drain pop-up, and then I'm going to leave my bucket down here for a couple of days just to make sure nothing comes loose. So I went ahead and reattached the stopper mechanism so the drain stopper now works correctly, and this project is done. So there we go. A new drain. I do need to grab this last little bit of plumber's putty out of the sink. There we go. Just throw that in the trash. And now we're finished. So if you've got a faulty or a leaking drain at home, those couple of things that you just saw me do will probably allow you to fix most, if not all, drain issues like that. I hope you guys have a good one. Stay healthy.